And everybody, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Build Show. And good to see you again, Ralph, as always.
Absolutely, you too. I flew in all the way from London
Yep,
in my
that's right.
in my car, London, Ontario. Yep.
Yeah, London, Ontario. I've heard that one a few times. Maybe that's where Oshkosh is or something. There's something in London that I remember.
Well, it's not Oshkosh. That's
No,
way far away.
I just remember that name for some reason. But anyway, so we just did a show a couple 3 weeks ago, but we're continuing to progress on it. So we're gonna play the remainder of Ralph's bridge that he's been building on that. Is that a Howe truss? What is the bridge that you've been working on actually?
It's a Howe truss, and it's going to join in with my long plate girder bridge, which was 8 feet, is now 7 to allow for the Howe truss.
Sure.
So
Um, actually, I'm going to play that video in just a second anyway. But if you had I know you've showed some of us, but I don't know if you showed that live on there. So if you had a picture of that section of your layout here in a few minutes after this video that you could show everybody, it might be helpful to understand where it's going to sit.
I'll
But
see if I can find it.
if not, we'll get back to that in a future show. We still have a few more shows left on this series anyway, something like another three or so.
Yep.
Honestly, it's just however many it takes to get there. Some of the
Right.
things I've been working on have taken me longer to uh, of course, it's me, so a lot of it's taken me longer to figure out. For sure, it's taken me longer to figure out, but you know, a lot of it's taken a lot longer to build than I would have assumed as well. So, um, so let's get rid of that view and get just this, and then are you ready to? You want to go ahead and you want me to go ahead and play the remainder of that video? Do you want to talk through that, and then we'll circle back to some of the where it's going to fit on your layout? And
Yep, we can do that.
okay,
So, as I mentioned before, with this bridge, I bought it off of eBay, and seriously recommend that you do not buy a kit like this unless it's complete. I was told this was complete, and I did not get instructions with it. I got a plan, but no instructions. So I built the thing sort of half-assed backwards, but it still
huh?
worked out. It still worked out only because I'm used to building all my models without looking at the instructions, but this was a serious thing, and I should have had the instructions. But anyway,
I
so
do a
I
lot of
built,
it with plans myself anyway, or
yeah,
just off the plan anyway. Just an exploded view is helpful, but this is a reasonably. There's a lot of pieces to this
there's a
puzzle. So,
ton of pieces with this. So what I ended up doing, that bridge, the picture, it's sitting on a piece of glass, and I had the plan underneath the glass so that I could refer to it and measure and all that kind of stuff. Um, so I built the top and bottom first, and the way they suggested in the instructions after I finally got them
yep.
was to build the sides first
Oh,
and then put the top and bottom on, because
okay.
then the
What effect
sides
did that
sides are
have?
complete. Well, I had to literally measure the angle that those two ends were on to get it right when I put the top on. So
Right, like it didn't work out naturally. You had to,
I had to make sure
calculate it.
that it was truly, the top was centered over the bottom, and that then the side braces fit in properly. Those angles you see at the bottom corners, that worked out okay.
Yeah.
So
Whatever.
after that,
Okay.
because I didn't have all the pieces, I started putting what would have been the large, I guess 1 inch rod in real life that goes from top to bottom that links it all together. I started to put those in, and when I
Well, let's go
finally
ahead and
got,
start the video, and you can talk over that anyway, because that's the part that I really enjoyed about your video. If you're ready, I'll go ahead and start the video because the
yeah,
truss rods are like right away.
go
Um,
for it.
and I really enjoyed like the truss rod
So they give you the
configuration.
truss rods already measured out, so you don't have to cut them. So they're all the same size. But what you do have to do is drill uh, down through the top. there's 4 pieces that create the top rail on each side and 4 pieces on the bottom. So there's a rod that goes between the crack of each one of them, and you have to drill down through. So what ended up happening, by the time I got near the end, my drill bit was getting kind of dull for some reason. It wasn't the usual drill bits that I had. Wow, your stuff falling apart or what? So it was a matter of placing 3 rods in each one. And as it went along, um, it was easy to do, and it was just keeping it vertical. Once I got it going down from the top, um, you could line up the bottom, and I used the plan again to drill the holes to put them in the right spot, and they end up going between. If you notice on the bottom, there's double uh, planks, if you want to call it, or actually, I guess it would be 1 by 1, 1 foot by 1 foot uh, ties, so to speak. So you're going down through, and then they give you little plastic uh, angles with the rivets or the bolt washer already engraved in it to tie it together. So once I got it in place, I used a little bit of crazy glue, CA glue, crazy glue, CA, and also to start, as it went through the bottom, I used some canopy glue as well. So I have them both in an open. I use beer bottle caps to put to pour out some CA glue, and I do the same with the CA glue. I can put it right on the glass. It doesn't matter, and it's just a matter of I take an old what do they call them, micro brushes with the plastic handle on it with this little knob of fur on the end, and I dab it in and put it where I want it. And you only need a little bit. So once it's done, and well, in that case, see, all the side rails are in, the cross members. I finally got the parts from Hunter Line. The rods went in. They went in kind of easy, actually, but it was just my big clunky hands trying to get it down inside. Now in this case, I'm putting the cross members in, and the members, some of them are quarter by quarter, and the other ones that are doubled up are quarter by an eighth, and you have to cut them to length, of course. So you got to be really careful. And what they've done is they've given you down where it meets the bottom and top, like you're looking at the side of it there, where the 2 cross members join. There's a block of wood that has the proper angle cut so that the cross member sits perpendicular to that face, and it really goes together nicely. So it's quite the kit, but I really do suggest if anybody buys it from eBay, make sure it has the instructions with it. So now I'm getting ready. I think I'm getting ready there. You can see the nut bolt and angle on the top of each one. I'm drilling now to put the nut bolt washer in. And they give you all this stuff in the kit, which is kind of nice. You don't have to go looking for the stuff. In all the building that I've done, and I have a truss bridge here that I built. and I did not use the nut bolt washer, and it makes a huge difference when you do that.
Yeah, especially on wood constructions like a trestle, for example, the NBWs or nut bolt washers make a lot of difference.
Oh, they
On
make
the
a huge
steel, I'm not
difference.
sure.
Just
Yeah,
just on this alone, like the wooden trestle I have here up just up above my shoulder. Uh, I didn't put the nut bolt washer. It looks okay, but I think if I was to put the nut bolt washers on, would absolutely finish it right off. And if I was going for uh, my NMRA certificate, I would probably get docked because I don't have them on there. But then I'm not going for it, so I don't have to worry about it.
no, and honestly, that makes a big difference to me as well on like the guard timbers that are on the outside of the deck. What you see the most is looking down on the ties, of course, and the difference in just putting the guard timbers on and putting the NBWs offset every other tie.
Yep,
Unbelievable difference that thing makes. And you can cut them off and glue them, straight down. But I'm assuming that you cut them with a little bit of a plastic left, and then take a pin and make a little hole because they want to stay instead of flat
ex-
cutting. Then they,
exactly. And that's basically what I did there. Is I measured a hole in a scrap piece of wood to see what the tail was on the back side of the nut bolt washer, and made sure that it fit kind of snug. So when I put it in, all I needed was a drop of CA, put it in place,
yep.
and it was there permanent.
Yeah, you get a slight mechanical a slight mechanical bond in addition to the chemical bond a little bit. I mean, at least from you get like a mechanical connection for shearing, for side to side, but and it's probably enough. That's what I've done on, I did all the NBWs on the water tower that I built. I put them on there. That is incredibly time consuming, or at least it was for me. But I do think it's worth it.
Dave BNSF N scale saying that he would have to use water bottle caps, and that's okay. Anything you can use to contain it in an open vessel without having it go all over the place.
But something that works as disposable too, so you can kind of ditch them and stuff. Is yeah.
He says a bit of wax paper is what he normally uses. I'm assuming wax paper down on top of the plan so nothing sticks to it.
Yeah, it's a great trick, and I stick to plans as you did earlier in this video series. One of the joys of having a glass piece to put on your workspace is being able to slide your plan under the glass. I mean, you do have to deal with the offset, but
Well, yeah, but you can sort of compensate for that by using a thin piece of glass. Well, instead of single diamond instead of double diamond glass. And in my case, that glass there was a shelf, so it was 1/4 inch thick.
that's what mine is too, I believe, or something, or maybe it's about. Actually, I think that's like 3/16, but it's thick enough that it works fine for if I could look straight down over top of it.
Straight down, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And it like I say, I built it basically from the plan underneath the glass. I got all my measurements by looking straight down. My measurements may have been out slightly because of the difference in the thickness of the glass, but it went together fairly easily. And by doing the sides like I've got it, I was able to put it down and see if I had the angle right. It's not hard to get the angle correct if you place the blocks above and below in the right position. The angle, the side rails go right in properly. What I'm doing there, you'll notice it's a pencil. I have a sewing needle that I cut the very tip of the eye off. So now it's like two fingers. And I use that. I dip it into the CA glue and I take it to where I want it. Just the capillary action holds the glue in those two fingers. until you push it down wherever you want it. And because it's a sewing needle, I have it stuck in the eraser of the pencil.
I like that idea. I've got several sticks made up, chopsticks or something that I've drilled and glued needles of a range of different sizes, larger needles, smaller needles, etc., because they're really handy for different applications for thick versus thin, etc. But the idea of sticking it in an eraser is just
Well, you don't have to hold
that's
it
just pretty
anymore.
slick.
It's got a
Well,
nice grip to it, right?
and it's versatile, so you can take that. Like I've got probably three or four, five different needles that I've cut the ends off from for for thick or thin CA and depending on how accurate, how much flooding of glue I want to put there. But I've got
Yep.
those dedicated sticks that now that have different ones. I can just have those little needles stuck in a piece of foam, a pin cushion, basically pull them out, stick them in a pencil.
Yeah. So maybe I'm cheap. What can I say?
No,
I
I like
I
well,
in
it works.
this necessity is the mother of invention. They say. I
Oh
didn't
yeah.
have any with me, and when I first came up with this idea, and I thought, oh, this works great. Why should I have to go out and buy it now?
Well, and you seen that thing? I bought some a few years ago that go in an exacto, like a
An
number 11 or
X-Acto
whatever
knife,
blade.
yes.
Yeah, and you picked on me a little bit for that because they do cost a few dollars, and they're honestly they're not that handy compared to a needle. A needle is better for most applications, but for canopy glue specifically, I could get canopy glue into some spots where I would have to reach back into, like when I'm working on putting glass in, and they're particularly handy for that one application.
That's why I used micro brush. Take the fuzz off
Yeah.
the end. Now I have a point to it, and I can apply my canopy glue wherever I want with that within
Yep.
within a 2-3 inch uh, range.
Enough. Yes.
So now I'm just going back and making sure that each one has a drop of CA on it. And after doing this, when I flipped it over, one of them fell out. So I had to find out where it came from, put it back in again. So there you go.
Oh yeah.
Model railroading adventures with Bill. Sweet looking bridge. Thank you, Bill.
Oh, that's
Somebody else said
beautiful.
that too. Dave BNSF said that as well. I and the only reason I have it is because I like the way it looked, not because it fits my scenery. Of course, I'm not a prototype modeler like Andy is. Um, I'm a freelance, but I like to have things look prototypical, um, especially with my weathering. My weathering is definitely prototypical.
I know that's
So
you strike an odd balance to me about that. I mean, some of your work is some of the most prototypical looking, correctly looking work that I see out there. It's spectacular. You're just, um, you just give yourself a lot more leeway than say I do over some
well,
things that are, different.
like you're building this bridge and it's prototypical, but when I build the bridge, I don't have to go through or jump through the same amount of hoops you do to do it. But to me, a freelance modeler, proto lance as they call it, has a harder job of making things look more real than a prototype modeler.
Oh yes, tremendously. People have this idea. I think, at least I've heard this a lot from people, is that they have this idea that they don't want it, that it's a lot harder to be a prototype modeler to do all this research and to figure out how to scale it down and compress it and figure out what to do and what not to do, what to leave off, etc. Boy, I have so many of the answers in my lab. It's already resolved. I just had to figure out how to compress it and fold it up into a room. But to make if you're a freelance modeler, to make a realistic scheme of track work, of operations, a roster of equipment, and to make that realistic, it's particularly challenging, and it's not done well that frequently. So much so that the people like you know Tony Custer and Alan McClellan, and those are some years back. But the people like these days, like Mike Coffalone and some of those people, the people who do freelancing well are rare enough that most of us can name the people who've done it well. Eric Bruman. It's not that big of a list of people who've done it well, because it's incredibly challenging to do.
So what is it you're doing now? You're setting up the bridge. Like I can see the aluminum channel going across there now.
Absolutely, and I've got to wait for a little bit of glue to set up, and let me show you actually, because we briefly talked about this once not too long ago. Actually, a couple shows ago, before I had this actually really done. So I had, at the time, I had tipped in the first abutment that has this inset into it. Actually, I bet
Yep.
you can see better on the other camera.
Got to turn it on.
Yeah.
There we
So
go.
so it has an inset, and I'll show you how
The plate
that
girder is going to go
actually.
into Aaron's shoes.
That's right. So, and it sets on a bearing surface, so it sets up just a little bit, so there's a little bit of clearance, but it sets back in here without a lot of clearance on either side. There's just a little bit of clearance down the side. Actually, you can see more that way. You can see how it sits. And this will lose a little bit of wood at the top. Actually, I can show you that now. This glue probably is set up a little bit. That's one of the beautiful things about Eileen's, is it sets up so quickly. So it's got, and this is just a piece of channel that's in here temporarily because I want to make sure that it all lines up correctly. It's not set up yet, but so I'll have to clamp it back again in a second, but I'll show you. So it has I've removed the piece so that the top of this sits right under there, so everything is flush and snug. Um, so it has that room, and then it has it has cutouts for this, and they're perfectly very snug too. So honestly, I'd probably get away without clamping this thing because it's all incredibly snug. And in this arrangement, which I showed this before, it has um, these are
Height adjustment.
yeah. It lets me adjust it and see from they're I-beam mounted clamps that you'd use in to mount something to a
Piping and
if you
so
wanted
on.
to hang a time clock or a wireless access point or something to a purling of a big metal construction. These are handy for stuff like that. And coincidentally, they are perfect for this, which is the reason I chose this actual size. This is 7/8 um, aluminum U channel because it fits this perfectly, as well as my road bed arrangement. So just as a sample of my road bed that has, two pieces of Homasote that are, 2 inches tall, and then two pieces of Homasote on either side that have the slope and stuff in them, and some masonite that gives me strength, but it sits perfectly down in there. So want to make right, all the benefit that people talk about with all thread for helixes, as you did on
Yep.
your helix as well, Ralph. It gives you
Yep.
adjustability as things expand and contract and all this.
Exactly.
Having that adjustment, many of my risers are going to be wood, just like the risers on the end of this panel. These, there's a piece of wood here there's a piece of wood here at the end. That's actually the end cap of the plate, and then there's a piece here that is the riser basically for the road bed. But I am using one of the all threads right at the end to adjust the height of the bridge up and down off from that, and it locks it in so that it can't twist, or if that, me and Ralph were talking about that earlier, it may not even be
Like
necessary to lock it in
you
because it's
you
so
guys
snug.
you guys may notice that there's a slight bit of a down curve in that line going across. That's only
Yeah,
because his bridge is twisted now. That's the way it would be when it's all locked into those the two ends.
yeah. I have to roll it over because it has a slight bit of curve in it, as you can see, because the bridge has a slight bit of curve to it. It matches. I'm sure the degree is not absolutely correct, but on the prototype, there's a gentle curve on the prototype bridge. Um, Actually,
You're surprising me. The degree is
Am
not correct, but you're a prototype guy, so how come the degree's not correct?
Well, I mean, I can't. It's not possible.
I know,
See
I
how that?
know.
It's
Yeah.
it's not possible. But see how gentle that curve is going through there. It's a
Yep,
gentle curve.
yep.
So it just needs to listen. You can be prototype all you want, and we've argued about this to some degree about the terminology. There's no such thing as 100% prototype. I also don't think there's any such thing as 100% freelance. If you're using SD40s and stuff, there's some amount of prototype in what you're doing. I mean, if you've scratch built a locomotive that, if you're modeling,
Oh,
2100 and you've scratch built a locomotive that is a SD300 or something, then sure, maybe, but but still, you're still using a lot of prototype standards for 8.5 inches. There's some amount of prototype fidelity in what we're all modeling. There's some amount of freelance in all of us because all of our layouts. I mean, if you're building a box car or a station or a small diorama or maybe even a small switching layout or something, possibly, it might be possible to get really close to 100%. But as you build, if you're a layout builder, just the compromises it takes to fold it up in a room and to selectively compress it means you're shooting for 75 or 80% prototype fidelity, if that. So,
right.
but I do try to keep that bar fairly high. So as you see in that picture, there's a very gentle curve. Mine also has a gentle curve. Actually, that gentle curve is a 22-foot radius. So, but it's a cosmetic curve. It's just there for cosmetics because the prototype has it cosmetically. And just like the prototype, on my layout, you're always looking north. Well, I mean, if the track is east-west, you're looking north. You're on the correct side. The curve is correct. Even though coming off that bridge, the track has to go back the other direction on both sides. So it took, a lot of finagling to make all that
We,
work. And I like Fraggles just fine, but it took, me and Ralph and Robert talked about this for a year probably.
yes, we tried to convince him to make the curve go the other way so that it would work better into his plan, but no, it had to go this way and then back again. So,
Yes. Yes. Well,
yep.
and something me and Robert done late one night recently was pulling the I would call it an alignment, but the height profile of the grade profile of the track. So this is all a helper district, and it's all climbing up through there. But coincidentally, the highest point, well, in this local area, the highest point about the bridge is on the downhill side of the bridge, and then it gets onto the bridge, and it goes, it's climbing and climbing and climbing. It hits the high point, it gets on the bridge, and then it goes back down some, and then on the other side of the bridge, then it climbs back up again. So it's like it's in a little bit of a valley, so it's dropping down, so they can shorten the bridge, drops down, goes across a slightly shorter bridge, and climbs again. And I'm also replicating that profile, but I had to make changes to accommodate that. I also think that'll be more interesting. It gives me a longer climb than I would have had otherwise. Um, yeah, Dave, I could, and it would go either way. Actually, I'd already done some of this before I committed to it. In my any rail plan, I actually have an any rail, a layer for it turned this way and a layer for it turned the other way. But now with the abutment fixed, so the abutment the abutment is affixed to this frame, and you can probably see better from the other picture. But this sets at the end of the module, and it basically goes all the way from the end of the module all the way to the edge of the bridge, and the U channel goes all the way to the end of the module. So
Yeah.
past out onto the actual roadbed, and then after I get this in position, I will have some, I will put a piece of homicide on either side to make my grade profiles.
So Andy and I were talking before we came on. He's still waiting for delivery of tower parts and plate girder.
And I have some of it. I have some of the towers and stuff that I've already built some of, but some of this stuff I ordered 3 months ago or 4 months ago. Maybe
Yep.
a while ago.
Yep.
I'm just going to have to reorder some of it from somewhere else. But part of this was, my original plan. Any of you guys that may know this, the original plan was that it went over the aisle, and part of the center of this bridge at this point, there would have been an aisle going through the center of it, and those towers wouldn't have existed. Um, And that was interesting, but it was there to solve a problem. And then, you know, Robert and me and Ralph, we've all, talked and argued back and forth about different ways of doing this thing. And one late night, I think Ralph, but one of them said, "Isn't it? Is there sure there's not some way that you can walk under the end of that thing?" So I figured out a way to do that. Well, we figured out a way to do that. So now there's an aisle that goes under this far side. There's also an aisle that goes under this far side. This module sets here, hanging from the aluminum, and the aisles go up both sides, but they don't go through the bridge. But because of that, I have to have a lot more plastic microengineering parts than I would have had I basically left some of that construction out.
Yeah.
But I've got the abutments made. Something we had not done last week, and I'll talk about that while I'm working on skidding some of these too. I built towers. Some of these I had a little bit of it roughed in recently with just gator board,
That's
but I hadn't actually started making them look good yet.
tower
So
foundations, tower
yes, yep.
footings. Pardon me, tower footings.
Yeah, it's hard to have it. I don't know exactly in the architectural diagrams, drawings. There's a number of different terms, none of them consistent and none of them perfect. So, um, but so I took, I got some that are unfinished. Yeah. So I took gator board, 1 inch gator board, and cut them to 1 inch wide, or slightly less than that because I've actually got to skin them again. So they're 15 16. Actually, I think they're more like 7/8. Whatever. So piece of gator board. All right. And then I wrap that in 30-second microply on the sides that are not, on the bottom, it doesn't matter. It gets I'll find that word in a second. It gets epoxied straight down to the platforms, and I'll show you that in just a second. But I think we talked about that very briefly, though. So, and then after it gets skinned, and it's all epoxy together, so it's quite strong. And I've stood on one of these, and if my butt could stand on it, it should hold anything up. So, but these platforms are skinned with 30-second plywood, epoxy together, and then I start skim coating the things. And I've skimmed them in a couple different things as a matter of experimentation. I got some of these skimmed in. This one's skimmed in drywall mud, but these are skimmed in Durham's, and I'm a fan of Durham's. Ralph is not as big a fan of Durham's, and I understand why. Durham's is a pain in the butt. It's
It,
awesome, but it's harder to work with.
it's too hard. For me,
Yeah.
it's too hard because the finishing of the when you skim it, the finishing is all in the sanding, and if you can't sand it properly, what's the point of putting it on?
Oh, it is more difficult. And one of the joys is I do have a bench top belt sander that, I've laid them
Oh,
straight down, and
nice.
that does pretty good
Yeah,
with it.
I got one too, but
So,
it's out in the garage, and I refuse to go out there
oh yeah,
because
it's way too much trouble doing it that way. Uh, but I could go set up and sand a bunch of these. I've been stick sanding a lot of these to just as I've been here playing with it because I'm not going to use that big bench sander with that in here. I have to
right,
take it outside or it's
just
and it was at
makes too
the
much
workshop at the
dust.
office.
Too
Oh
much
yes, and
dust.
a lot of noise and everything. So, but I started skim coating these and and closing them all up. So they start as just regular gator board. They get skinned up like this, and then add their, they need to be cut to length, and then the plan is to, let's see how well, yeah, okay, so there's like a shelf here and here at each side, and then these get glued down to that platform, or in the valley, at the bottom part of the valley, actually, let's help this just a little bit. So at the bottom part of the valley,
It went
there's
back up
plywood
again.
platforms. Oh, did it? Okay. I leave it to laptop. Okay.
There we
So
go.
there's a wood platform on either side. Of course, this is a couple inches thick on this framework, which we've talked somewhat about my framework or something, but not completely. And it's skinned. So here on the inside of this, you can see this is eighth inch masonite. So the whole bottom of this thing is already skinned in, so I can fill it in with scenery like a tray almost. And if I need to cut some of this framework down, I don't think I will. But these get epoxied or glued down to these platforms such that the bridge platforms,
Towers.
set on these. And I do need a little bearing surface, but they just set on these. It's cut to whatever height, so it's strong. And then the point of that is you have a um, you have a bridge, girders epoxy to the side of that, which I'm working on, and actually I may go ahead as we talk start gluing some of those together. I'm just still missing a few of those to complete, and I'm going to dedicate one of probably next month's show because I'm going to order a bunch of these from another source while I wait on the others. I mean, it's not a big. I still got 3 more big long bridges like this to build, so it won't hurt me to have more of them. I've already over ordered. I just haven't got them. So
Right.
the tower sets, and then the girders are epoxy to the side. Track on top of this, of course, and I'm playing with some ideas about that. But basically, just track on top of this with wood ties and tie plates, and the guardrails, all the beauty, and the guard timbers with the nut bolt washer castings, as Ralph did recently. Which this thing's 7 foot long. I need to roughly count how many ties that is, but it's going to be a lot. So a lot of NBWs to go across those top plates. But anyway, you have the tower setting on top of that. The tower sets here, and then you have the towers that set the base of this on the bearing surface, and they set on top of these little shelves that are here. And those shelves are immediately around, and I planned this so that those shelves are immediately around where the C frame is, that holds this whole thing up. The C frame holds that shelf. So the whole C frame structure is right under each tower, roughly centered, but not perfect, but roughly centered under each tower. And then has these little platforms glued down. It's all in the framework. I couldn't imagine this being stronger, considering that some of these towers, they're just plastic, of course, but these microengineering towers actually get quite strong
They are
as they're
very
glued
strong.
together.
They're very
Absolutely.
strong.
But these are so there's the base kit is 3 I think that's called a purling or a cross, lateral. It's 3 laterals high in the base kit. When you buy the extension kit, you get 2 more. So it's roughly 10 inches tall. When you buy the extension kit, it adds another 6.5, I think it is. So it adds 2 more of those, making a 16.5, 17-inch tall tower. These towers, the tallest towers that are right here and here are roughly 20 inches tall. So I have to add another, kit bash, another height to it. So there's 6 crisscrosses tall, just like the prototype. That's a lot of plastic in its height. So I want everything to be as rigid as it can be where it mates. So while it's quite strong, if anything else really moves around a whole lot, it doesn't give me a lot of room to work with. And these have these cross braces, which I have in here, but the actual prototype bridge does not have that. So it just has the cross braces on the ends, making the the single component, fairly strong. But on the laterals going up and down, it only has the X bracing. It does not have these laterals. So if it ends up that I have to have them, fine. The next one I build, I'm going to build without the laterals, the horizontals or the lateral components. I'm going to build the next one without those and see if it's strong enough. I think it probably will be. Um, if it is strong enough to do it without it, if it's not strong enough, I'll have the laterals back. But I would really like that's a cosmetically, it's very noticeable that they're there, and on the prototype, it's very noticeable that they're not there.
So I have a question for you. And I know that you've been thinking about this because
Okay,
you're already thinking to having it finished. I know that. That's just the
yeah,
way you are. What are you doing? What are you doing for ties? I know you can't help it. It's just the way you are. What are you doing for ties, and how are you fastening them to the bridge?
So my assumption is they have to be epoxy down. I can't imagine another good choice other than epoxy. Well, so possibly you could use contact cement. I've thought about using
I
contact
wouldn't,
cement. I've thought about that a lot, but epoxy is just a known quantity. Most of this stuff is epoxy together anyway. Um, it's a known quantity, so I'm pretty
because
sure I'm going to epoxy them down.
I have to do that to my 7 foot bridge because there's 1,500 ties. I
Yeah,
have no idea how many I'm going to need. Maybe only a couple of hundred. Who knows?
that's about it. I used to have that number in my
There's
head.
500 there, and there's 1,000 in there. And these I've
It's
already stained these.
oh yeah, that's handy to do that because I set mine up and stained them on a flat surface, and
Yeah,
I
but
got a bunch of tricks
okay,
for staining
so
tires.
here's the thing: you can't really do that because you're going to have the plate girder on the side. How are you going to paint the plate girder and then stain your ties?
Well, I do stain them before I install them. I just normally set them up on a lay them out flat. A lot of people like stain them in a in a bag process. Put stain in a bag, etc. I lay all my ties out flat with the side I want up on paper on masking tape, paper
Yep.
tape, and then I take a wire wheel in my little cordless dribble, which is about the only thing that cordless dribble is good for, in my opinion. But I take the cordless dribble and I take that wire wheel to some of them. I've got a little contraption that takes 7 or 8 X-Acto blades and squeezes them together so you can kind of rip the elongated cracks. Because if you look at a tie, they're all cracked. I mean, even the new ones, they're all basically cracked
Well,
laterally.
see,
So
I'm not going to go that far.
oh, I distress all of the ties, and then I stain them with 2 stains. I use I forget what it is, like I use a
Oh,
dark ebony, and then I use a regular kind of oak or a dark oak, and
okay,
I use a dark oak, and then I ebony some of them.
but you're talking about the way you do your regular track work. But now you're
Yep,
working on the bridge. So if there's any irregularities in the ties, and chances are there might be,
yep.
how do you level it out if you've already stained them?
Well, so I had that problem to solve years ago when I first started figuring this out, because I use those tie plates, you can't do the way I've hand laid track forever.
All right.
You glue it all down, you put a straight edge, and then you sand them, and then maybe you stain them a little bit more to fix where you had to sand them. You can't do that with tie plates. So what
True.
I've fell in love with doing on the regular track is putting down my ties on transfer tape, on double sided tape, transfer tape. I put them down, and then when I contact cement the rails in, I can push the rails down into it with a lot of weight. And if it happens that there's space in there, it'll get the bottom of the rail, the foot of the rail
Right.
down into the contact cement, and it'll pick the ties up a little bit. And then when I
Right.
ballast it, it'll glue them all in rigid. That's a little bit more challenging in this scenario. So I'm really
Exactly.
curious as to that. So I've thought about using a slightly thicker um, VHB, very high mod, double sided tape that I have that's clear and stuff. I thought about that, putting that down, and then coming back and maybe putting some dots of epoxy through with a needle applicator or something. And I may do it with that using the VHB tape across the bridge, because and it's quite thin. It's not double sided tape that's an 1/8 inch thick or something. It's VHB tape that's like the transfer tape, but it has maybe a 30-second worth of flexibility and padding in them. And another key is the ties you buy. So I've got some Kapplers and I've got some of these other brands, and nothing against any of the brands. I don't know all of the brands well enough to say, but Mount Albert's ties are lockstep consistent. There'll be a little
That's
variability, but
that's
they're
what
as
I
close
got.
to perfect.
That's what I got. The
They're
Mount
they're
Albert ones.
incredible. Well, they're incredible. And I had a bag of Mount Alberts from many years ago, and when I got back in a few years ago, I bought some ties, and some that came with something I bought had some Kapplers or whatever. They were some of them were crooked and stuff. It was just an old bag of ties, and been laying around and probably had
But
boxes. So it doesn't
prototypically,
matter.
bleh, can't even.
Yeah,
Prototypically, it doesn't matter if it's curved.
right. They there's a lot of that, and that's fine. For heck, it's useful. I buy or have bought several of those bags of I forget what size they are. They're like matchsticks, but they're slightly larger than that from Hobby Lobby. And they're all kinds of
Oh yeah,
crooked and
yeah,
diminished and edges. And for like a dirty branch line that's buried, boy, you can't
yep,
beat them. You'd have to
yep.
work your butt off to get ties looking that good
That's what I used on
for
my
the particular
barge.
application.
That's
Oh
what I
yeah,
used on
they're perfect.
my barge lead.
But on a bridge, they're pretty close. And the color, there's not that the variability that you see in colors on the out under ballast happens because they replace them, whatever. On a bridge, they're pretty consistent in color. So I'm going to use a
Oh yeah.
single, I'm going to use a certain mix of that ebony and that whatever that oak is or whatever. So, it's not all completely black, but very close, creosote. And it'll be it'll be a single color all the way across.
Well,
Maybe there'll be a couple ties that are a little more diminished.
you may want to try Hunterline.
But I have a bunch of Hunterline stains. I'm a real big fan of Hunterline stain for sure. Um,
That's what I used. I used a combination of the creosote black and driftwood,
huh.
and I thinned them out with uh,
Alcohol
90%
probably?
alcohol.
Yep, IPA.
Put it in a jar, and then just let them sit there for an afternoon. Then picked them out, put them on a paper,
Yeah.
let them dry, and of course, because it's alcohol, it dries almost instantly.
Oh, and I've
But
tried a bunch of different techniques, and I don't have anything against staining them loose like that or whatever. The only thing you have to consider is if you stain them loose, the chance that they warp a little more is there versus gluing them down and staining them. But it all depends on how you're handling a track. If you're gluing them all down, going to sand them, and you're going to lay rail and spike directly on top of it,
well,
which is what I would do if I was in the narrow gauge or something.
okay,
But with the
but
tie plates on a
we're
bridge, that's
talking
not
about the
possible.
bridge. We're talking about the
Yeah, it's not
bridge,
possible.
and especially this bridge, you're going to have to put some spikes in to make it look authentic,
Well,
prototypical.
my tie plates have them molded in.
Yeah, but
So,
I don't. I'm not using tie plates,
oh, that's
right?
right.
So when I put my rail on, I have to put spikes in, but the spikes can only be as long as the tie
That's
because
right.
it's aluminum
And
underneath. It's aluminum underneath, so I got to cut them short.
so are you
And
planning on depending on those spikes for the mechanical
no,
connection, or
no,
are
no,
you
no,
going to
no.
contact cement it?
I'm going to CA it.
Okay. Well, I've done some CA for ties. In my experience, CA is quite brittle. So over time, it really doesn't have to hold that much since you're spiking. With contact cement, even just DAP or whatever, although I like barge better, with contact cement, it has a little bit of flexibility. So expansion and contraction, and the rails don't want to let go.
Well,
Also, contact cement's easier to apply.
in that case, I can use Pliobond.
Absolutely. That's what
And if
Plyrobond
it
effectively
starts
is
to
contact
let
cement.
go, all I have to do is run a soldering iron over it. It reactivates the
Yep.
Pliobond.
Well, that seems to be true of most of the contact cements, which I like barge real well, but it has a shelf life. So I end up just using the DAP stuff because I can buy it at Wally World for a few bucks. It's not as good as barge, but it's
Is
close.
is that the smelly stuff, or is that the environmentally friendly one? Is that the one
No,
that
none of
mixes
those
with
are
water?
environmentally friendly. No,
Okay.
it's not water based. Water based, I've tried the barge water uh, based version because I really love that because it doesn't have the same shelf life problems that the solvent based version does. The supposedly, but it doesn't have a. It's not nearly as strong. It's just significantly not stronger. It's also hard to dilute because you can't just take water to the water based product. You can't just add water dilute it. Whereas
Hmm.
these are dilutable with MEK is probably better. You can dilute it with
Okay.
xylene as well. If you're
Yeah, but
diluting epoxy, xylene is better. But
you're going to be indoors now
MEK,
doing that.
yes. But I don't do that much of it at any one time, and it's not that there's not that much context in it. I mean, I mix up a thimble, the bottom half of a thimble full of a little MEK and a little contact cement, and then just dot along the tie plates and put a little along the rail, and let it
Right.
tack off, and then use a soldering iron. Also, with my tie plates, I can't lay that much track at any one time anyway. I can build the bridge in one sitting. Actually, it'll take a while to even build the bridge. So, and I use a different. I have put most of my tie plates down with CA, but again, it's brittle and it gets brittle. So they sometimes want to turn loose. So I've took to using Cypox, which is like CA. It has an activator with it, but it
Hmm.
has some of the rigidity of like a polyester epoxy or something.
Oh
And
yeah.
you know,
Okay.
it's a little cross between the two. It activates like CA. It sets up really fast like CA, but it has some more of the strength of epoxy and the slight bit of flexibility. However, from Adam Savage on YouTube, on the Tesla channel on YouTube, for MythBusters fame, he was recently kind of exalting or extolling the features of a new CA type that is a flexible CA. I haven't got any to try it yet, but he was, you know, And that's my biggest problem with CA is that it gets incredibly brittle over time.
Yeah, there is a company in Britain, in UK, that has a flexible CA right now. I
Well,
forget the
I don't
name
know
of it.
where he got that. I need to. It was. He's talked about it a couple times on
Okay.
a couple recent videos. I'll look that up and share that or something. Um, but anyway, and I've been skinning these towers because probably don't want to run a terribly lot longer tonight. But I want to talk about these last few things. I've skinned these. I've done some of them in um, like wallboard compound or whatever. Basically just not plaster of Paris, just drywall mud, basically. Largely at Ralph's suggestion, which he's right. It's easier to work with. But this Durham stuff, also I do the Durhams, and I got some here, but I can't. What do I do with it? Um, well, so I mean, it's Durham's water putty. I mean, most people know what this stuff is, but there's Durham's water putty. Oh, there it is. And then I use Durham's water putty, and then I just use whatever the cheap Tipra dry powdered Tipra paint to
Right.
kind of darken it up. Um, and you have a certain amount of working time, but if you only mix it in really small batches, you can let it set up a little bit before before you work with it. And then, like I've done a couple sides of, I've done two sides of this one so far, then I'll just go
Hmm.
skin the back side of this thing too. Um, and if you use the right tool, I think they call this a spudger. Actually, it's not a spudger; it's a different kind of tool. But it comes in all the fix. These are my favorite. I got a crap ton of these. They come in all the iPhone kits for repairing an iPhone and peeling the screen out when you repair iPhone
Oh,
screens.
yeah, yeah.
Um, or if you have an iFixit kit, which having an iFixit kit is handy. All the little screw bits and stuff, and the best one to have. I've had a ton of those little kits through the years, but the one from iFixit that comes with the stars and the pentalops and all the different screws, man. That is money well spent to have one of those. But you can buy these little, prying tools. It has one sharp end and then one kind of rounded end, and
Yeah.
it makes it not as bad as sand because you can get a pretty good coat. And for working with small scenery
So really
stuff
what you
like
want is a really nice flexible spatula.
that works pretty good too. It might be a
Like
little too
an
large, but yeah, you can do that.
artist spatula. That's
What I
so
do
anyway,
ground goop
there's
with. What you pick on me for doing ground goop with.
right.
Um, an
There's
artist
my
knife, a
there's
palette
my
knife.
bridge. Can you see that?
Oh yes, there you are. Where it's going to be.
So it's down here at the end. I have to finish all of this in here. And there's my 7-foot bridge, which I have to put towers under.
But you don't have. I mean, you're going to have the towers for cosmetic reasons, but they're not mechanically. They're not necessary.
No,
Um,
that
yeah.
takes the weight of about 4 or 5 locomotives, no problem, no deflection at all.
Huh.
That's why I asked you about yours. When you put yours in place, um, you get it fixed on those ends without putting your
Yep.
towers in. Just put a couple of pounds on that bridge and see if you get any deflection because you've got that curve to it, which
And because I had to cut them to get that curve,
I don't think you'll get any problem or you'll have
I
any
don't think
problem.
so. Well, it's relatively strong. I mean, there's a little bit more than before I cut it. But since I cut it and epoxied it back with an epoxy, and I put the aluminum, that was like one of the first videos that I did in this series. I used, the aluminum shavings or whatever that come out of this, and I run out of that and use some aluminum powder too. But aluminum powder and epoxy, man, it makes it really stout. So, um, I mean, yes, I had to cut them, but and we'll see how that works out because I still have another one to build that's straight, and then I have two more to build that are quite curved, significantly curved, but they don't. I could probably build them without even aluminum channel and just use the microengineering stuff. But I'm pretty sure I'll still use the aluminum channel. It's just an easier superstructure to have
Yeah.
that you're just skinning it. So you know, I think I'll just do that even on the others that are above. You know, I mean, the reason I used aluminum on this one, per our discussion and per your recommendation about that, was because it was going to go over the aisle. Otherwise, I may have just stuck with plastic. But then once I was already down this road, it just makes it so much easier to work with. You got one big bridge that you're just slapping cosmetic parts on, really.
Yep.
So, and I'm getting real close to having those. I need a few more of those, but I've already been cutting. I've already been cutting those up and getting the cut out of that. So these are ready to be epoxied
Yeah.
onto the side of the bridge. And I'm sure I'll just go ahead and do that. Start doing that. I was just had a couple questions I was trying to figure out, and I really wanted all the rest of the parts of the other towers before. But at this point, I'm pretty sure I'm just going to commit to just a straightforward process.
I
Only
got
thing
you
to
on
keep in
I got
mind
you on
is
video saying that now, so you can't change your mind.
no, I feel very good about that. I mean, I thought about a bunch of different things. I would love to have enough brass and all the stuff to actually build brass sides with the resistance iron and all that stuff. But the compromise that we all make. I've said being a layout builder for sure is like a choose your own adventure book that I read when like the books I read when I was a kid. Choose your
Hmm.
own adventure books. It's a choose your own compromise. I've said that numerous times, but it's like a choose your own compromise. You've got to make it. And by all means, I can build these bridges in brass and do that. But I've got a whole layout to build. And it would take a year. You would dedicate to building that
That's
thing.
right.
So, but my hope is that after my layout is up and meaningfully working in, say, a decade or something,
Then
maybe
you
I'll
can
calm down and do that.
exactly. Exactly. So I put a question out there. Any questions from the guys? Any question, guys? And nobody responded. So I guess we don't have any questions.
Yeah, we talked
Um,
about a whole bunch of little loose stuff, but not any, nothing large. We got Ralph's. Um, his bridge is actually now complete in the video. Um, and then I basically was just catching up with everybody over the like 4 different things I've been working on,
yeah.
the endpoint, getting the endpoint complete with its abutment. Those will be ready, and I'll have those installed by the next video. All the towers that um, all the towers that hold up the towers, or all the concrete pedestals that hold up the towers. I've got most of those complete. I got a few more to skin, but they're very close. Um, so, assuming that the parts come in on the next show, we're going to get the bridge girders complete,
Right. Right.
and then we can deal with the steel towers. So,
Right on.
um, and that seems pretty solid. I set that up with Eileen. So, well, thanks you guys. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll have another show. This one was there was a 3 week break between this and the last because um, we had a significant delay between a couple of shows. As I built this big beast, I talked about that on the last show. As I built this module, there was some delay as I got the module ready. But and we're going to try to shoot for another 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, depending on availability for the next show, as we typically do. But we're trying to. So 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Look forward to the next build show, and we'll see you guys again then. Ralph, you got anything
Yep.
else?
No, I'm good. See you next time.
All right.
As
Thanks,
Bill would say,
everybody.
see you on the radio.
That's right.